Hello everyone, my name is Aaron Christensen. This is Horror 101 with Dr. AC, celebrating classic horror throughout history with new episodes every Friday night. Tonight we're discussing Jacob's Ladder from 1990, directed by Adrian Lyne from a screenplay by Bruce Joel Rubin. Two names that don't immediately scream horror luminaries, and yet the pair, along with their incredible creative team, managed to deliver one of the most challenging and rewarding horror efforts of the much maligned 1990s. The in-your-face rubber monsters, outrageous gore, and practical effects wizardry that defined the 80s were starting to wind down, and into this undefined space stepped a film that blends the psychological grit of the 1970s with startling imagery that taps directly into our collective nightmare centers. Jacob's Ladder follows Vietnam veteran Jacob Singer, who begins experiencing terrifying hallucinations and fragmented memories years after returning home from combat. As his visions intensify, Jacob uncovers hints of a possible government experiment linked to his unit. Reconnecting with his surviving comrades, his search for answers forces him to confront the trauma of his past, struggling to maintain stability and sanity in a world that seems to be crumbling around him. With a stellar cast headed by Tim Robbins, Elizabeth Peña, and Danny Aiello, Lyne and Rubin take the viewer on a descent into existential terror, an unnerving and emotional journey that leaves us asking questions as the credits roll without ever feeling cheated. Jacob's Ladder is mentally stimulating and profoundly unsettling, a cocktail of pain, suffering, loss, and redemption, served up with such confidence and skill that cannot be dismissed. It remains a wildly influential and devastating effort that continues to reward year after year, view after view, rung after rung. Going up or going down? We're going to be talking about Jacob's Ladder from 1990, celebrating its 35th anniversary, and we have an incredible panel to chat about it with me. Let's bring everybody in, and let's say hello to Emily Barney.
Hey.
Dominic Conti.
Hi, everyone.
Julia Marchesi.
Yes.
And Ben Beard.
Hi, everybody.
And we're going to be chatting about Jacob's Ladder from 1990, celebrating its 35th anniversary. And we will be talking spoilers, and we mean it. So if you haven't seen this movie already, please go check it out. Then come back and join our conversation already in progress. Thanks for coming on the show, everybody, and welcome. This is one of those movies that completely changes from one viewing to the next. I remember seeing it for the first time in the theater in 1990, and it was such an immersive experience. I did not know what the heck was going on, but I think that's kind of the point. But once it's over, you do play the movie back in your head and you go, wow, okay, so how much of that actually happened? I'd like to talk about everybody's kind of origin stories, like how they came to this movie for the first time. Julia, do you mind if we kick things off with you? Thanks for coming on the show. It's your first time on the show. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. And I think the first time I watched Jacob's Ladder was on VHS. And I think it was on this exact VHS that I had bought from a video store. Still works. And it's one that's interesting. My mom really likes this one as well. So I remember watching it with her, and it's very unusual because I'm a huge gore hound. I have, a podcast about horror movies. I go hard horror movie survival guide in the whole bit, but I love gore in horror movies. But if it's in war, I can't do it. My brain will not do it. My brain's like, nope, don't want to see it. Like, even though I know it's the exact same effects that are happening, I can't. So I avoid war movies at all costs, and I don't see them because they really, really upset me. But this is a fucking war movie. And I'm like, I don't know why this one's okay. The beginning's horrific, but I'm like, whatever. My brain says this one's okay. And I go, all right, great. It's a fantastic movie, but yeah.
Do you remember what your reaction was when you saw it for the first time?
I mean, I think it's the same as you say, like you watch it and then once the ending hits, then you get to watch it again and in a whole new way. And I think I've watched this movie so many times now, and I always find some new little detail and really get to think about like what is happening when and that kind of stuff. And I went and read the script as well before today because I heard that there was lots of differences and stuff. So I also did that, and I was like, all right, let's see what it could have been, what was meant to be, and what we actually have. And I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Dominic, let's bounce up to you. What was your origin story with this one?
This was right when my third year of college, my friends and I would meet up every week in all sorts of various altered states. And we watched a series of different movies, and this was in the mix. Miller's Crossing was in there, State of Grace, King of New York, and maybe one other one. And so, yeah, and in all different sorts of states of mind. And this is when I got into acting, when I kind of got into film. And I don't know whose idea it was to watch this, but I was blown away over the I don't know, maybe we watched it 15, 20 times, as, like every week or two, renting this out again. So again, in all different sorts of states, and then enjoying it, like Julia said, in different ways, once you know that ending, and still, and then picking up on different details.
Emily, how about you?
I would have watched it in the early 2000s. I'm not a gamer, but I'm a big fan of the video game Silent Hill 2. When it came out, my roommates were gamers and bought it, and we played it all the time. And then when I moved out, I bought a PlayStation 2 for myself solely so I could play Silent Hill 2. So there was a website talking about, the pop culture influences on the game, and it mentioned Jacob's Ladder. And I would have been 9 when this came out, so obviously I didn't see it then, but I do remember the trailer playing on TV and just images that kind of stuck with me, just being really strange and creepy. I hadn't been spoiled on the ending, so and I think as a horror fan, we're more accepting of someone seeing demons, of seeing the supernatural in their reality. So I wasn't really confused about that. Like, I kind of accepted that this is really happening to him. And then with the experimental drug storyline, I kind of took it as face value. I didn't feel cheated by the ending or any of that. I've kind of seen a lot of people had that reaction at the time. But for me, it's more about Jacob's journey of accepting his death rather than the death itself. There's just so much going on, so much to pick at. And as I get older, as I get closer to death myself, I experience it in different ways. And so it's one that's always going to be kind of in rotation.
Great. Thank you. And Ben, you've actually written a book recently, Four Horses, Seven Seals, in which Jacob's Ladder plays a very big part. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I saw it as a teenager on TV, and I caught it out of order. So I remember the sort of the party scene till then I had to go to dinner or something. Till my parents called me for dinner, so I missed the end. I watched it on TV off and on for, a couple of months. So it was even more scrambled than the movie, but it's a really profound movie for me. And it hit me in my religious confusions, and it hit me at the right time. I might've been 14, 15, 16, something like that. And so it got marbled in with my own bewilderment over my religious upbringing and where I fit in the world. So it's a very important movie for me. It's one of the movies of my life, really. I don't revisit it that often. It's almost sacred, even though it has a few missteps, very small missteps, if you watch it a lot, as we all have.
And can you talk a little bit about how it factors into your book?
It came out in 1990, and the book is, I went to a religious retreat in Panama City in 1990 with Elvis Presley's half-brother. And Depeche Mode's Violator and The Sandman also came out around that time. And the three, in my mind and in my memories, have kind of formed a snowball, and how they've impacted my life as I move through it. And rewatching Jacob's Ladder at different periods of my life, like everyone else here, I see different things. I didn't know at the time, but now it's a big part of my sort of religious deconversion.
Thank you. So yeah, our origin stories all do kind of speak to the fact that this is a movie that continues to evolve as we evolve. And it's interesting because, our screenwriter, Bruce Joel Rubin, he'd written this about 10 years prior to it being produced. And Adrian Lyne, our director, he was somebody who was coming off of the success of Fatal Attraction. He'd had Flashdance prior. And so he was looking for something to do. And his agent found this for him. And Julie, you said you looked at the script recently. It is a very different beast on page than it is once it made it to the screen. The story, on the face of it, is a Vietnam veteran who is ostensibly back from the war, but he's starting to have some weird reactions. He's seeing things. They may be PTSD. We're not sure. But that's kind of what the movie that we're seeing, but we keep dipping in and out of time, it's like a Kurt Vonnegut novel in that respect. And we're never quite sure where we are in time or in reality. So, Julie, I'm curious, like, how much was different for you? What did you see? What were some of the major differences?
Everyone had said like it read like a novel, and I feel like the script does like all it's more descriptive than most scripts that I've read. And the interesting thing is how much of the visual horror is described in the script. So like the vibrating head thing, he talks about that. Like he talks about this, like it's looks like it's too fast out of frame. So I was like, oh, I thought that would have been something that the director would have come up with, visually, but that's all in the script. And so even like Jacob and Jesse are laying in bed, it's like, oh, and he's laying this way and her hips over here and his hand, like it's really describing it all really visually. And there's we can, when we get to the end, I can talk about the endings a little bit different, but the kind of most of it is pretty much the same. There's a couple of scenes in the beginning that are expanded a little bit, or like just kind of, you can see why they were kind of unnecessary. But it is a beautiful script and it is incredibly well written. And I can't fathom why it was sitting on anyone's desk for 10 years because it's so gorgeous. I understand like it's dark subject matter and maybe it's a little tricky and you don't want to go there, but also it's so beautiful. How could you not do it? So when we get to the ending, I will tell you all the differences therein.
Well, there were directors that had wanted to make it. There had been a lot of names mentioned, but Bruce Joel Rubin, he really wanted this to be well made. He wanted the right director, so I think he said no to a lot of people. And then, of course, there's studio concerns. How much the studio is going to support the movie and not just kind of make it a schlocky horror movie. So that he was really trying to avoid that. So I think Adrian Lyne was kind of the first person who he felt safe kind of taking care of his baby.
And you have to be, you're pointing pretty big fingers at the US Army as well. So you have to be okay with that because like this is part of what this film is.
I read earlier drafts too, and I read his autobiography, which pretty good, by the way. It's only a movie. His original concept of the ending was impossible to film. It was a kind of Gnostic where Jacob's spirit leaves the earth and like flies through the universe. And he wanted it to be, I think in his words, Spielbergian. It didn't work and was impossible to make. I think he's a really good writer. I'm like with you, Julia. I think this it's really well written and it's really compelling. I think he actually got lucky linking up with Adrian Lyne, who's a bit of an underrated presence in this movie and then as a director.
I agree. And I mean, you talk about luck because both this movie and Ghost got made the same year, 1990, and Rubin ended up winning an Oscar, which I had completely forgotten that Ghost won the Best Original Screenplay Oscar. So after we finished watching Jacob's Ladder, which was frustrating for my wife because she had never seen it before, and she's like, how long are we just going to watch this person just be punished and punished and punished? If you hang in there, I promise it's worthwhile. And it really is a different movie. And I mean, I'm not going to hold off on talking about the ending, but it is one that we were immediately like, you know what, let's see what Ghost, how that one holds up. It's interesting, Rubin's fascination with the afterlife, at least in this moment in time. But this movie is very much an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, Ambrose Bierce's story, where a lot of things happen at the moment of death. Tim Robbins as Jacob Singer, he's in Vietnam and a firefight happens within his company and we see him injured. And then that triggers him back into what we think is present day. Turns out it's not present day. It's a fantasy of a life he might have had. I love how that plays out. As a horror fan, I'm kind of used to treading in liminal spaces where I don't actually know what's going on. I figure it's all going to pay off eventually, and I'm enjoying the ride. Watching it this most recent time, I was surprised at how little horror there is in it, considering what a horrific experience it was for me the first time around. Those images were so striking to me that that's what I remember taking away. But as I watched it this time, I was like, oh, there's actually just these select moments of horror throughout.
Full disclosure, this is absolutely one of my favorite movies of all time. And AC, you hit on it right there. When I look back on the things I love the most, it's all the dramatic elements. It's the regret. It's that beautiful ending. It's that moment when his kids tell him he'll be okay, and that disembodied voice says, dream on. And it's just, that is the scariest, saddest thing that I can think of right now. It's just amazingly beautiful. And it's kind of, I guess it's worth it to see this kind of ordinary guy get his ass handed to him for 2 hours. You know what I mean? Like he gets punished. You brought up something, AC, the occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. That guy is a Confederate officer or soldier. And so he has like, he kind of goes through hell before he finally dies. And so there's something about, not that anyone deserves to go through hell or go to hell, but like there's something about him that maybe, you know, on the wrong side, and maybe, you know, like that is something that could happen. But Jacob Singer, you sort of see him in this sort of existence of suffering sort of way. And he's just a regular guy who's made mistakes, and that he just, you know, suffers so sublimely, you know, until you get to that end, you know, and then you realize, you know, what the story was altogether, you know.
You know, it's funny. I'd never thought about the Confederate soldier aspect of it, but I mean, you know, as soldiers in Vietnam, we may also have been perceived as being on the wrong side.
Hey, you know what? Yeah. Okay. That's a good.
That's fascinating. I'd never thought about that before.
We were in somebody else's country.
The more I watch it, it's really the key to the movie is Louis' speech about Meister Eckhart and dying. And, you know, that if you're fighting against death, you know, you're going to see demons tearing your life away. But if you're accepting it, they're angels. And so it's, you know, now I don't see it so much as Jacob is being tortured. He thinks of it as torture. He's holding on. He's still holding on and fighting for his life. I don't know. It was just interesting watching it. Like, I think the first time, you know, you really see Jessie as this kind of evil character. You know, she throws his family photos away, and, you know, she yells at him. Her face changes into this demonic face. But I really felt for her a lot. And if you look at her as an angel who's, you know, she's trying to help him move on. She becomes much more sympathetic, and, you know, you can understand her choices more in that light. I think just that speech by Louis, like, that is all you need to know for this movie.
I think about that, Emily, sometimes that, like, that's almost a little bit of a maxim. Are all the things that are going on, or these other people who are, you know, harrowing me, you know, are they demons or angels that I can learn from and improve upon, you know?
I mean, life is this gift, right? We only get the one. So of course it makes sense for us to try to hang on to it, because also we don't know what comes after. So, you know, it's knowing this pain versus something else that we're not familiar with. I love Jezebel and, you know, Elizabeth Peña's portrayal thereof, because I do see her as a sympathetic character. She genuinely seems like she cares about him. She doesn't like to see him cry. You know, she doesn't want to see him in pain. So she's trying to take these things away. But then we also see it on a deeper level, and that she's getting rid of his life, you know, for him.
But it's interesting because part of the alternate ending took that ambivalence away and actually made Jesse a demon, like the head demon who has been torturing him this whole time. So I like that they kept that out, because I think that would color that character in a way I wouldn't like very much. I think that the ambivalence of it is the beauty of the performance and the character itself.
There's several deleted scenes, and they're all really great in and of themselves. You do kind of see Adrian Lyne as an artist when you watch these. It makes sense that they're not in the movie, and they've talked about how they did test screenings where they had those scenes in, and people are exhausted. Oh, why are they just they keep going after Jacob? I really like the ambiguity. You know, there's a scene where they show kind of the party demon more, who has sex with Jesse. Like they show more of that, and I really like Lyne's approach to only showing flashes of the creatures. You know, so your brain is kind of filling in your own fear, rather than just a lot of horror movies. Just, okay, here's my creature effect. I worked really hard on this. We are going to show every inch of it.
Right.
You know, he doesn't do that. He lets your imagination do the work.
I think it's interesting that the script I think what they cut out is sex and violence. And I was like, that's usually what they're adding into a script. But this one's like, no, taking that out. I'm like, interesting.
Yeah. Holding it at a remove, which is really a smart move to keep us like kind of leaning in, right? It's not in our face so much as it is kind of inviting us to try and catch a glimpse, to try and figure out what it is we're seeing. I think it's a really smart move on the part of a filmmaker, is to not make it so kind of like blast you with it, but rather going, it's over here, it's hiding back here, so that you have to engage with this movie. I do want to ask, how much of this do we think is actually happening? When we see the whole business with the chemical testing, Is that even real, do we think?
For me, the horror of this movie is that aspect of it, right? It is the government poisoning people and not telling them and just trying to cover it up. When I was 15, I read about MK Ultra, and that was great because then I was like, hey, our government doesn't care about us. Fantastic. I know it real young. I'm all set. But that's this version of it. We're like, yeah, do I think the US government drugged their own soldiers in Vietnam? Almost 100% yes, of course. And they're not going to tell it. Of course they're not, because of this big government agency. They have the power to kind of hide. But as I was saying, like military war stuff makes me very uncomfortable. The thought of the Vietnam War especially makes me uncomfortable because it's all these people who didn't want to be there that were drafted and dying for who knows what. And so, to me, the demons and the stuff is scary, but like that aspect, that's the most terrifying part to me. Like it really, really gets me in deep because I'm like, sure it happened to people. Yes.
Well, this is something that I think maybe this is what you're alluding to, Ben. Like there's no way for Jacob Singer to know that, to have that in his mind, to kind of spring that forward, that theory. All he knows is that he was sitting there one day and suddenly everybody started attacking each other. The idea that he would be able to conceive of this plot, I think that's the one thing that kind of feels a little wonky for me. And that's where I go, I don't know what's actually true or isn't. The fact that we have the little disclaimer at the end that says that, the US government denied any use of this drug. Further thoughts on that?
You just kind of knocked me back a couple steps there, AC, because I hadn't thought of, like in terms of like, what could Jacob conceive of?
Right.
And I think before now I had thought that essentially everything that happened in the Vietnam times could very much be true. Absolutely, they could all freak out on a drug and shoot each other up. And then after that, he's dreaming. And it's not so much like what's the capacity of his imagination, but what type of imagination does this individual have?
Sure.
And if he's a scholar, and if we could take it that he's kind of a scholar and a reader, and maybe someone himself who knows something about history and has some ideas about what, the government is or isn't, he might be that type of person, AC, who could then fantasize about a possibility of the government having done the thing that's putting him, he is dying from in those last seconds. I think that could be. You have to extrapolate that. You have to think about what his imagination is. Yeah. But I think it could be that. He could be that guy.
I think the title card is like fact in the movie, and it messes up the movie for me because the movie has except for a few exceptions, it has like put us in Jacob Singer's mind. And so it's the subjectivity is what makes the movie work, right? Like if we pulled back and saw him in a like lying in an imaginary maze or something, it wouldn't work because we're going through it with him, right? So that title card at the end is like, yes, the movie is partially about drug abuse and government malfeasance because these were big issues to Rubin because he was a 60s guy and he took, if you guys don't know, he took his first time taking LSD. His friend held up a dropper full of LSD, was going to do one drop in his mouth and accidentally did the whole thing. And the whole thing like flew into his mouth. And he stood there and they were like, and he goes, well, I guess I'm going to go somewhere. And so he had these like all these mystical visions and it changed his life having this LSD overdose basically. So, I mean, there is druggy. I mean, that is a big part of the movie, but that last title card pulls me out of his subjectivity. I love the last scene where the guys are like, man, he fought like hell, didn't he? And there's like a patch of sunlight through the little triangle in the tent or whatever. I think that's studio meddling. I haven't found who put that in there. I don't think that was Lyne or Rubin. I think that the studio was like, we have to like put some objectivity at the end of this film.
I think there was an interview with Rubin where he said that was a producer that added that on.
It doesn't work for me because it's one of my favorite movies. It's a very important movie to me. And every time I watch it at the ending, I'm like, ugh.
Yeah, because that does feel like an outside statement, whereas we have been living with Jacob Singer the entire movie. And then suddenly we have this outside voice telling us about these accusations and the denial. With regard to like being in the modern era, when he comes home to, it seems like it's New York.
New York is hell is the first thing he sees on the subway car. So, but it's not modern day because this was made 1990 and it's set in 1975, right? So that's the other thing.
Right. And I love
And-
that attention to detail that we see throughout.
But I wonder why would his brain go to that year specifically? That seems like he just jumps forward 4 years. Why 4 years? Why not 10 years? Why not 2? I don't know. Let's go with it.
I don't know. Why do we think that his brain goes there? I mean, I think, we have that sense of here's what I can imagine. I can't imagine what the world's going to look like in 10, 20 years, but I can imagine what it's going to look like in 1 year or 3 years or 5 years.
I think the movie wants us to believe him, right? Like
Right.
all along. And urban decay, like that in the 90s, like that, like 70s urban decay is like, that's what we expected from movies set in big cities, right? So like if he were in San Francisco and it was gleaming and everyone had money, it wouldn't work. And the misery around him is reflecting the misery he has inside, he's carrying inside. It's an as above, so below kind of situation. If he's in the suburbs of Atlanta, again, it doesn't work, right?
New York in the 70s, you could, yeah, I didn't live it, but, you watch the movie The Warriors and, they didn't have to paint up or, rip anything down or make it look destroyed to have that, be a functional, cruddy character in the show.
I love filthy New York. It makes me so happy.
I think jumping to the future also adds to the sense of unease. Like this last watch, I was really thinking a lot about like the age of his kids. Jesse says that he was in Vietnam for 2 years and, he's apparently been divorced or separated from Sarah for, probably at least a year. But then he has these memories of his kids and then they're the same age that they are when they visit him in the hospital, the nightmare hospital, so that definitely like threw me a little thinking of that and kind of then started to throw me thinking of his memories of his family. Are those even real?
Yeah. Well, that was the question was, did he get divorced from Sarah? I definitely get the sense that Gabe did in fact die before he went to Vietnam. That feels like so present for him. I don't think it's something that happened while he was away, while he was in country.
I always kind of get the feeling that was part of the reason why he went, was that he kind of needed to get away from what happened and try something different. And I think, but going in, he doesn't realize that he's not going to come back out.
In this last watch, I started to kind of wonder if Gabe ever even existed. Like, in the photos, his son Eli, brings them over because his mom was going to throw them away. But there's a photo of Gabe in there, and it's like, why would she throw that away? In the box of mementos he has of the war, after the lawyer says, "Oh, you guys never even went to Vietnam," and he has this box where he's like searching for evidence, like, yes, I was there. And there's a letter from Gabe, like, when are you coming home? Mom wants money, send her money. And it kind of makes it seem like he wrote that to him while he was in Vietnam.
Right.
And there's just little things like that. So, I mean, I haven't decided if he did or didn't exist, but it definitely threw a wrench this last time I watched it.
You just kind of touched on something I want to bring up, which is this is one of the most amazing capturing of dream logic in a movie, because things do feel real and then they shift and that feels real as well. And things happen that you're not even there to witness, like we have Eric LaSalle's side of the phone conversation where we see, he's there with his people. That's not something Jacob could know, but in his dream, he does know it. And there were just things like that David Lynch, I think, often gets credited as kind of the perfect purveyor of nightmare logic on screen. But this is predating, Twin Peaks and Fire Walk with Me, Mulholland Drive, all of those things. I think it's just an amazing depiction of a dream unfolding on screen.
Yeah, this movie is, I think it's ahead of its time. We'd see A24 bang out movies in this style now over the past 10, 15 years, but probably all influenced in some measure by this film, because I mean, it's kind of wild that they got this done and then that got that done in the way that they did it with all the choppy scene structure and the dream logic.
And I don't remember this being a big hit. I think it was successful in, its initial release for the first couple weeks. I think it got some decent reviews, but then it did very much kind of drop off because it's not necessarily an accessible film. It's not a mainstream film by any stretch.
But then it became a hit on VHS and became a cult following. And, because clearly, and I think Tim Robbins is such a incredible performer to be able to give, because there's a movie that I love that he's in called Tapeheads, which he did the year before this, where he's just a crazy goofball being silly. And you look at this, you're like, it's incredible. Like the coach, his range, and for them to take a chance on him and really push for him to do it, I think was such the right move, because this performance is incredible. It's like really luminous.
And Tim Robbins, as you say, he was not the person I would have thought for this role. We had seen him as the goofy guy, Nuke in Bull Durham, Tapeheads, he's in Top Gun, he just was always playing like these big kind of goofy characters. And to watch him play this restrained and really painful character, you can see, shades of Shawshank Redemption to come. But this is the first time we're seeing that.
This is my favorite of his performances. This and The Player, probably this, between, comedy and drama. I mean, he just really nails it.
That's kind of why he was cast, was because he would bring a lightness to the movie that, you need someone boyish and funny and warm, to get you through this kind of these horrific events.
I'd read something, I forget if it was Bruce Joel Rubin or Adrian Lyne, that said they cast him for that reason. He did bring a humor to the role, even if they didn't really let him use it throughout, much of the film. There was a light touch that, kept you going along with him. I don't know, whatever they did, it worked.
I actually don't like Tim Robbins that much, except in this movie and a few others. In this movie, he's so good. You start to wonder about his career, like how it could have gone differently for me. But yeah, you could see them casting like Sean Penn, and the movie would be a disaster. And I like Sean Penn, but he would wait every scene down, would be like, right? Whereas Tim Robbins sort of, it's not that he bounces through them, but he has a simplicity or something. And his blue eyes, when he's in the bathtub and the camera kind of goes in, and his eyes look like ice cubes and they're teared up. And when I think about it, it like upsets me emotionally. It gets me. And I don't even know why. But it does have something to do with Tim Robbins and his performance. It's also kind of sexy. He's kind of sexy in it in a way that, like, you on multiple viewings, I think other actors would not bring that into the performance. But yeah, it's a special thing. And I don't know if they coached him. I don't know, like, I actually I've read a lot about this movie, but I don't know like how he got there, what he brought, and what like they sort of pushed him into doing. Yeah, it's almost like a plot. Like you could see him living a different life after this movie if it had been a little more successful.
It's funny you say that you think he's sexy, because I think it's his kind of non-sexiness that plays. Like he's so kind of awkward, and like you get to see him naked and his body just seems kind of all little like misproportioned.
I would say his body looks perfect.
Glad to hear it.
Say that. But in the script itself, there's so many sex scenes in the script. Like reading it, he had to have known, like it's going to be full on everything. You guys are naked in the whole bit, so it's going into it knowing that. And I appreciate we get nudity from both of them. Thank you.
Absolutely,
for equal time.
Well, this is the guy who gave us 9.5 weeks, so he's not scared to put the flesh on screen. This is a great cast of actors as well, and it was fun to see some soon to be familiar faces popping up. I'd completely forgotten Ving Rhames was in it, Jason Alexander, Matt Craven, who was certainly having a moment in the late 80s, early 90s.
Pruitt Taylor Vince is in there, given an astounding performance as always, right?
It's funny, I watched Angel Heart for this. It came out a few years ago, and it's not related, except Carol Co put it out, and it kind of gave the fact that it did well, kind of gave them the courage to do this. And Pruitt Taylor Vince is in that. And he's a lot thinner, he has hair. And one thing I noticed, like his eyes in this, like they're always twitching, his pupils are always moving back and forth.
He has a condition
but he doesn't do that in Angel Heart, and so it's like I didn't realize it was the same person at all. Like he just is completely transformed.
His eyes always do that.
Okay. Well, I just in Angel Heart, like
but he is great in Angel Heart,
thing.
And I feel like this is the perfect movie to double feature with it, because they kind of go hand in hand. And I like that Taylor Vince is the link.
Yeah.
You have two characters named Lewis.
And that I wanted to ask about that though, because Lewis in Angel Heart is Lucifer. Lucifer was an angel, right? So is
Yep.
that the kind of what he's saying with this as well?
I would argue yes, because he's certainly the one who's framing it for Jacob, right? If he was the devil, if he was Lucifer, he's going to say, you might see me one way if you are looking at life a certain way. You might see me a different way if you're looking at it a different way. So yeah, I thought that was a very wise choice for name, because especially having seen Angel Heart, that's if I ever see a character named Lewis, I'm like, or is it Lucifer?
I think you're getting to the movie's central ambiguity in a way, is that the imagery is Christian mostly, but Rubin was not Christian at all. He's a mystic who had meditated and was going to ashrams, and he had rejected all of that. But Lyne wanted to couch it in Christian imagery on screen. And so what happens is you have that part of what makes the movie memorable for me is that it's not simplistic in how it utilizes the images, right? So the last image to me, the penultimate image, is a Christian image, like going up the stairs, and it's like a golden hazy light. It's very beautiful, very touching. He's seeing his son again. Rubin didn't believe in that at all, right? Mm-hmm. He believes in life after death. He said, like, every one of my movies is about the fact that there is life after death. So that's in there, but like Lyne put it into, couches it. I don't remember what it's in the screenplay, but I mean, he's filming it in Christian terms. I think that like speaks to the heart of the movie, which is a question that it doesn't want to answer.
Can I ask though, if we're on this subject, Jesse says that Jacob told her that he sold his soul for her. Do we think that's real? I was like, oh, okay. Have souls been sold? I don't know what's happening with that.
I don't know. This is the second time that I feel like I've been bashed about by you folks in a good way. If we go along with the idea that like your demons are really angels, maybe the reverse is true. And Pruitt Taylor Vince's awesome performance as this dejected at the end of his life person, he seems like an angel, but actually is a demon, leading Jacob off to his catastrophic thinking that gets the whole thing really going, and then so he's really Lucifer guiding Jacob down the wrong path. And I hadn't thought of it like that. And so now I'm just kind of off my pins.
and he was assumedly would have leading Jacob to his direct death, right? Right when they go outside, the car explodes. So if he's trying to get him in the car, that absolutely makes sense.
Oh, yeah, right. I hadn't thought about how direct and quick he might have been, or just getting him down the path to torture and horror might be what Satan, Lucifer, Lewis wants. And now I got to think about that.
It was kind of the opposite, where Adrian Lyne is an atheist, and Bruce Joel Rubin, even though he's kind of a Buddhist, his original script was more kind of Judeo-Christian, and the ending was very kind of the celestial staircase he talks about. And Adrian Lyne didn't want to have kind of familiar Judeo-Christian images. He felt that was too familiar. People either weren't going to be scared or they would think it was funny. So he was wanted to root it in flesh and in real things, and wanted to do away with as much kind of religious imagery. Like we see it a little in Jacob's looking at Gustave Doré's illustrations for Dante's The Divine Comedy. So there's like a little peek of that, but Lyne kind of actually took a lot of the more traditional Christian stuff out of the script.
Yeah, and kind of dovetailing onto that, Emily, I mean, the idea of we see hints of things that are tail-like. We see things that are horns-like. That scene when the nurse leans forward and her little cap falls off and you just see that weird growth on her head. I don't think of these are horns, but I think that there's something weird going on. This is something that's uncanny and unnerving. The tails are I love the use of the one in the person on the subway, definitely during the dance sequence. That moment, again, I talked about my first experience watching it in the theater. That image stuck with me for weeks, of that tail just plunging out of her mouth so violently. And you see it for only a split second. It's not something that they linger on. It is a shock moment, and it does exactly what it's intended to do.
And I really love that him getting his palm read at the party. And interesting for his own mind then to be telling him, like, people keep telling him that he's dead, right? Like, she tells him that he's dead, the doctors tell him that he's dead, like, it keeps happening. And it's like all these people are, oh, it's just you though. Like, that's, really cool to have this. Are these people that he really knows, or are these people that are just completely made up in his mind?
That's a great scene with Asapatha Murkerson. I know her from watching a lot of Law and Order, but in the original script, that was written very straight. Like, oh, there's just a fortune teller and she reads his palm. But here it's very sexy, and I love that Jesse comes by. It's like, oh, are you flirting? And and she just laughs. She's not threatened or anything, but I love that little moment with the two of them doing the palm reading.
You talked about the Judeo-Christian aspects of it. I mean, we have an ascent, at the end. We absolutely have a descent into the hospital. And we haven't talked about the title, but I mean, that is that journey from the earthly realm to the heavenly realm. That's the idea of Jacob's Ladder. We are playing with those levels throughout the movie, and we see him existing on different planes. We see him existing in different timelines. Like, he's constantly drifting up, down, back, forth. And that's what, to your idea of, like, does he know these characters or has he made them up? I mean, they could be, somebody he saw on the subway one time. I love the idea that Jesse is somebody that he works with at the post office, who he's probably only had this interaction with. And now, like, he's decided that he's married to her. Like, that's what his brain is doing in these moments of shock and distress.
And it goes back to when the first thing Ben brought up was the idea of the biblical Christian imagery. I mean, that's the story of Jacob, and he either hallucinates or really does see this ladder that goes from heaven, or from earth to heaven. And so it just kind of really starts with that. What is Jacob hallucinating, and what is he not hallucinating?
Even in the Christian faith, there's so many different interpretations of what that passage is about, and no one can quite agree. And I think that seems fitting for the movie, right? Because we all kind of know what the movie's about, but the movie is elusive, I think, in some final tally, and that's why we love it, right? It doesn't just tell you. It keeps kind of like ducking around. And AC, I've stopped even caring whether his son dies or doesn't die, or if he even exists. I don't care either way. The movie's power doesn't reside in reality. It works in how it bombards his emotional centers, right? We've all had a kind of short daytime fantasy about another life that we might be living, right? And they're powerful. I mean, for me, they're powerful. They work, and they can hurt. And then you wonder, that's something I'm never going to get to do. And the movie kind of, for me, goes into that too.
I would say that you have to earn that place of not caring. Like, I think your first watch, you actually do care, and it can be frustrating. I know it was certainly frustrating for my wife. And I could tell that, she was watching it for the first time. I'm watching it for maybe the sixth or seventh time. We're watching the same movie, but she's having a very, very different experience, because I'm already looking at these little clues here and there. Are they clues, or are they just fantasies? Who knows? Whereas she is trying to nail this thing down. Like, what is the story that I'm being told? You constantly keep pulling the carpet out from under me. I don't know what you want me to get out of this. So yeah, I think I agree with you. I don't care anymore either. For me, it's a wonderful buffet of what ifs, but I think you have to come to that eventually. Emily, did you have something you want to add?
The end of the movie, the staircase in Jacob's apartment, originally it was this celestial staircase that goes into the unfilmable, angels and heavens and everything. And so, Adrian Lyne and Rubin, were working on this for a year, and Lyne would call that Liberace heaven. And I just, I love it. Just brings up this image of, you can picture what Rubin was going for with that.
The Monty Python, The Meaning of Life version of heaven. Yes. I do want to circle back around and see what are some favorite moments, ones that maybe we haven't mentioned yet, or we can highlight ones that we have talked about.
My mind went right to one of the straight horror moments is just how well we go from Jacob being wheeled from the normal hospital to the hell hospital. And then just the gradual changes, the scary people sitting, by the grate, you know, the head's twitching, and then it's just straight up hell, and the guy with no eyes is about ready to, you know, do an experiment on Jacob. So it's just a perfect finish to, you know, that like horrible hell hallucination moment within a movie that's kind of just one long hallucination. And I think that's trick. That's some real artistry.
The thing that I forgot watching it this time, that it's a Christmas movie. It's a Christmas movie. It totally is. They talk about, like, Michael says, like, oh, it happened a month ago, right around Thanksgiving. He gets robbed by Santa, right? Like, this is the whole thing. And I was like, all right, another non-Christmas Christmas movie. Because my favorite Christmas movie is Brazil. So I'm giving you, like, this is the kind of, I want the torture with the Christmas. They're together so well.
We can program this right here.
Yeah.
Dominic, who would guess that one wheel wobbling could be so unnerving? But Lyne knew it, and he like strapped that camera right onto it and is following it. When it hits that chunk of meat and just hangs onto it for like a second or two, I was like, I don't know why that works, but boy, that's just awful.
So awful. Yeah, like the terrain gets trickier, you know, on the wobbly wheel. Oh, can't push the wheel as well. Then the terrain gets just straight horrible. You know, there's like the various like maybe like plant tree stems in the ground on top.
Oh yeah,
of
yeah,
the
yeah.
ground.
Like
yeah,
the
like
roots,
you know, and then the wheel trips on the chunk of meat. A guy with no eyes is gonna poke a needle into you, and that can't go well.
The last couple watches, I was noticing a lot more the cuts between the Vietnam scenes and then his imagined life. You know, he gets in the shower and then it cuts to him on the ground in Vietnam and it's raining on him. And then, of course, you know, when he's in the ice bath and then he goes to being cold in the bedroom with Sarah. And there's just a lot of moments like that where there's a flash of light and then, oh, there's light in Vietnam. So just seeing all those little moments, the way they cut it together, I really love those.
I think my favorite moment in the movie is the girls singing Please, Mr. Postman to him. I think like it's such a sweet moment that doesn't feel sappy or rehearsed or anything, but gives you this just kind of moment of joy. And his little face lights up and he's so cute to have this. I don't know. They're like, you know, because the movie is so punishing to him, I think having this cute moment it doesn't forward the plot. It doesn't mean anything, but it's something like, I feel like this movie would be worse without that scene. I think it really does give a little something.
We haven't even talked about the fact that he's a postman, you know, like why that, you know, why does that the thing that he comes home to? I mean, he's a doctor. We don't know what he's a doctor of, but you know, he certainly has studied a long time to be doing something else that isn't a postal worker. But in his mind, being a postal worker is the thing that requires no thought.
He delivers messages from one place to another. I'm reaching here. I don't know. You know?
No, that's a good reach, though.
I've been thinking since I first watched it. Why is he reading The Stranger? You know, what's the stranger to him? Camus, the stranger that he opens. You know, like the movie makes it clear that you see that book. So what's up with that? You know,
well, that's just like him being the outsider, right? That he feels in his own world. That kind of puts it right up in front. I think that's, you know, and I always thought he was a doctor of philosophy because that's what Louis like. Oh, you philosophers don't know your right from your left.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like I thought the stranger does a horrible act that he can't explain. That he can't explain why he did it, and then he suffers.
The girl singing is also my favorite scene, and it also it disrupts your like. It seems like it's from the early 60s or the late 50s or something, and the movie feels like it's different times happening. I mean, it's clearly the 70s, like the squalor, but some of the other stuff happening feels like it's from another timeline. And that scene really, I think it's what Julia was saying. I mean, it's exactly what the movie needs right then. It needs a nice moment, and it gives it to you.
And I know this was kind of one of the inciting incidents for Rubin to write the script, but that falling asleep on the train, not sure if you've missed your stop or not. I've done that, and it's terrifying, especially if you are in, you know, a late night train where you're like, okay, I don't know that these folks have my best interests at heart. And you have people who give you no information. I've never been in a station that was locked, but apparently that's a thing as well, where it's an entrance only station versus an exit.
From what I've read, that was the inciting incident to make this script happen, right? Like
right.
Rubin had a dream about this happening to him and how terrifying it was. And I always love when dreams just kind of naturally flow into something. Like you take this little seed and then like what comes from there, because from just that you could make any movie you wanted, right? Like if you're just thinking about that scene, for him to add all these different layers to it makes it so delicious.
And I love that, you know, when he's on the tracks and you see the light coming toward him, but he doesn't know which path to take. There's a movie right there. Which path should I go down? Which one will get me out of the path of destruction? Which one will take me to salvation?
There you go. It's on the nose. I love it.
But it doesn't feel on the nose. And I think that's one of the things I really like about this. I think the most on the nose it gets is our final ascent into golden light. But also we've been riding this train for 2 hours at that point. And I think we're okay with, you know, having a little familiarity and something that feels comforting. And I guess that's my last question is, do we feel like the ending is satisfying? I'll just leave it there. Do we feel like the end is satisfying in a way that you want it to be?
Shall I jump in here with the script's differences in the ending? Jacob does a big demonstration on the building steps of the army, and he has gasoline and he has a torch, and he's doing this demonstration. All the demonstrators want him to light it. They keep saying throw the torch, and he won't do it. And so people throw matches and it lights. But he's like in the flames, but he's okay. Michael shows up, who actually gives him an antidote to ladder. So he's like okay for a little bit. Like he lives a little bit of an alternative life. Michael gives him a credit card. He lives in a hotel, and Jesse shows up, and like he's like, oh, this is really nice. Everything's gone. But then he actually is going to go to Chicago and like buys a train ticket. But then he comes back to Michael's apartment, and Michael is killed. His head is decapitated from his body. And then he sees when he goes to Sarasota at the end, Jesse shows up, and he's like, who are you really? And she says, you know who I am. And then transforms into kind of a monster. But then there's the vibrating creature that he's always seeing. He actually decides to approach it because they're saying like they're not devils or angels. And when he approaches it, when it finally stops, when he grabs it, it's his own face, but dead. So that's like he actually is like looking into his own death right there, which is I think kind of cool. Then we I think the very last lines of the script I think are really, really interesting. Like all of this we've seen going forward to this, the last lines of the script are, it is a bright, fresh morning, the sun is shining. So that's right after he's dead in the tent in Vietnam. But that's the last lines. And I was like, oh, I guess I don't think of that as like a hopeful moment, but I think like that's really interesting to have a script that's all been about death and harshness and punishment and life and regret, and like, oh, but now there's this new beginning. The sun is rising. I think that's really lovely.
It does go on. This world keeps turning, whether we're part of it or not.
Those guys were genuinely admiring too. They say we put up a hell of a fight, and maybe that's what they were kind of saying was, that is life. You batter and swing and struggle away, and then it does end. But like this guy put his shoulder into it, and there was something good and something worthwhile about that. And then other people recognized it as well.
Is it satisfying for you to maybe realize that all of this has just been a dream?
I'm good with it. Yeah, I think especially it's what you were saying about how that ending was earned. I mean, it could be said to be obvious, but like it works on a number of levels. Like, well, I guess the pre-ending, where he like, his son, there's a son-father connection. There's an angel leading him up the stairs, walking up into heaven, and like being rewarded, really ultimately, for his realizations and his struggle. I thought that all worked. In some ways, that was kind of the ending, and then there was the end. Then another ending is that when the guys say, he fought like hell, didn't he? And then I guess really there's another third ending. I guess tacked on is that, that they say, supposedly these soldiers were experimented on, and the U.S. armed forces makes no comment, but they all work for me, frankly.
And Julia, thank you for sharing all of those what could have been endings. I like the one we got. How do you feel about it?
Oh, I love it. And I think that the shameful thing about it is that in 1990, what a fresh, new, exciting ending, right? And I feel like in 2025, it's not, you'd be like, oh, okay, like it's not as radical, but seeing it for the first time, of course it is, right? And I love that we do get to have him be happy at the end, and I feel like if this had been a movie where he didn't get that reward, I think it would be, but even in the original ending, like he's dead, but he has this smile on his face, right? They look how peaceful he looks. And so I think that that's kind of all you can really ask for, even if you've been, stabbed and are dying. Like, if you have this peaceful death, then that's what you really want.
I think it's satisfying. It's warm and quiet. He deserves peace, and it means a lot to me, the ending. I don't like the title card. Like I said, I don't like the sort of little credits thing at the end. I think that mars the movie for me, but doesn't ruin the movie's power.
So going back to kind of the original ending, Gabe isn't in the original script. He was, added, and Lyne really liked the idea of a role reversal of the son kind of leading the father. And for me, I love the ending. Like, I cry every time. And, because it does feel so warm, like that house, this, with the old wooden stairs and this kind of warm glow to it. Yeah, I just tear up every time. And like Ben said, the title card does kind of throw me off a little, but then we have that nice still photo behind the credits of Jacob and Gabe, walking with their bikes together. And so then I get taken back again. It's very sweet.
I think it's very strange. And this isn't all, I know that we have the poster with his face, but then they also have this poster with that image, right? I'm like, this is a spoiler. This is the ending of the movie. Why would you put that as your image? That's nuts.
And I remember that from the trailer, like seeing that when I was a kid, like that image of him going up the stairs with Macaulay Culkin.
Yes, we haven't mentioned Macaulay Culkin, who would be in Home Alone later this same year. Like, this came out in the summer and Home Alone came out at Christmas time. And there was a time everybody knew who Macaulay Culkin was.
Yeah, his dad actually had him removed from the credits because he felt like this didn't fit in with the image they wanted for him. They wanted the Home Alone image. So,
and something you said, Julia, like where this falls in time, 1990, we are coming out of the 80s and horror doesn't know what to do. And I feel like that's kind of why this movie, I don't think, is as talked about as much as I would like it to be these days. Younger fans have yet to discover it because it doesn't get the same press as a lot of other movies. As we're leaving the 80s and coming into the 90s, this is a direction we could have gone. We kind of went down the Silence of the Lambs path with a lot of serial killers and psychological thrillers and things like that. But this was something that was very different, an untethered horror, which, is the kind of horror that I love, that makes me just really unsettled, leaving things out there kind of in the shadows that you have to lean forward and discover on your own.
As nauseating as the phrase elevated horror is, I feel like that's kind of what this is, right? Like, because you can have your Friday the 13th where they're just giving you, boobs and blood, and that's great. But then what if you want to think a little harder? What if you want to watch it 2 or 3 times and try to figure out how the pieces come together? I think, a movie that you kind of have to watch more than once is a clever movie, right? Like, that's one, you don't know how many times I've ever watched it, but you kind of, if you watch this, you have to be like, oh, I got to watch it again. Like, it's a whole different movie on the second viewing. And I think that's brilliant.
Well, it's funny. The last episode I did with Horror 101 was 1990 art house horror. And it's like, this would have absolutely fit in. Yep. I'm glad we did a singular episode for this one, because
that was a rather rich meal that we tried to devour. Let's circle back around and offer our final thoughts on Jacob's Ladder. Thank you so much. What a great conversation this has been. And speaking of Ben, why don't we kick things off with you?
It's important enough to me that I wrote a book about it. And
the link is below in the description of this video.
I didn't know it at the time, but it's scrambled my religious beliefs in its images and in its reverberations and in its the kind of consequences, the philosophical consequences and ramifications of what's going on in the movie. It's like sort of hit me on a trajectory, and I'm very grateful for it. I do think it works partially because it's one of those movies that, like Rubin and Lyne, I don't think they set out to make a horror. Neither of them are like horror movie guys, really. Right. They like backed into it weirdly. And I think that also is what gives it its punch. They didn't set out to make a Friday the 13th or whatever, right? A Halloween 5 or whatever. So but it's one of the movies in my life. On the one hand, I wish everyone would watch it and it would be like in the canon. But on the other hand, I don't want to give away something that's personal and sort of belongs to like a small group still.
Julia.
I can't recommend it highly enough. If you're looking for a horror that is incredibly well made, beautifully shot, incredibly performed, with a script that has lots of layers that will keep you guessing, but also leaves you to decide how you feel about the characters ultimately and what you think is happening. And I think, any film that provokes discussion is a good one, and one that, I feel like we could debate this for hours, right? We could go back and forth and be like, what about this? And, fight and picking apart little things that we've seen and I think everything's a little clue. And I think that's so fun, but it feels created, like artfully made, and a beautiful film, and something that wasn't made necessarily to be a box office smash. And I wish it had done better, of course, but I feel like it's kind of what you were saying, Ben, like it is nice that it's a cult classic, but as a cult classic, you want to go, well, it's a cult classic for a reason. There are movies that stick around because they're good enough to stick around. And so obviously this one is, and I have my horror movie podcast, and this is like one of the first 10 episodes we did, because I was like, we got to get in there. It's so fucking good. Because I think for me I'm a director, I'm a film programmer, and what I love is showing people films that are terrific, and if I can influence you to watch Jacob's Ladder, then I feel like my job is done.
That's so funny, Julia, because when I did our first book, Horror 101, we were doing, the essential horror films, and this was smack dab in there. I'm like, no, everybody needs to see Jacob's Ladder. And
yeah, I
it's
think
surprising
it's so cool
to me that, we're this far along and like people are still having to be reminded about it.
But I think, what Emily was saying about like coming in through the Silent Hill door, I think is very interesting, right? Because this is images you're used to, but like, oh, this is where they come from. And that gives it a whole different weight.
Emily, how about you?
It's interesting because Adrian Lyne and Bruce Joel Rubin aren't horror people, but they were trying to intentionally make this scary. They were playing with the timing and the look and everything. They wanted this to be scary. They wanted it to be a horror movie. And I think it absolutely works, both visually, but then also in an existential dread kind of way, which is much rarer. And I really love that. If anyone watched it and maybe didn't get it, or wasn't sure about it, give it some time and come back to it, because I think it's a very rewarding movie to watch over and over again, and you'll see something different every time.
And Dominic,
running along the theme of like, your demons can really be angels leading you to heaven. I feel like I like this movie even more now, if possible. And now I have to see it again, because you folks have been my demons who are angels telling me these things. I'm like, geez, I didn't think of that. So I was a little angry at you, unfairly. But now I think I've got it back again, and I'm going to just watch it again with some of these new thoughts in my head. And let them come to fruition. It's great. I mean, as many times as I've seen it, I hadn't had it sorted out. I wasn't that arrogant to think that I did, but I thought I had more of it sorted out. And it's just great to have these new opinions and just have this movie, it's, 100 years from now, people are going to watch this movie, and it's just great.
Yeah. To your point, Dominic, like I think it is a movie that invites interpretation, invites investigation, but I don't think it is necessitated by it. Like you don't have to figure it out. You don't sit there and try and make your dream make sense and you judge it if it doesn't make sense. It's just a dream. This is just a movie that captures that experience in such an exquisite way. I do think that it is one that continues to be rewarded on multiple viewings, but I also feel like it isn't a puzzle to be solved. It is a work of art that is meant to be enjoyed and immersed in. Much like this conversation, I am so thankful for this conversation. It was just great to have all of your insights and enthusiasm, and looking forward to having you all on again very soon. Until next time, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare.